And welcome back to the Cape Town Fashion Council's COVID Reboot series, the series where we educate, inform, inspire and empower you, but most importantly where the Cape Town Fashion Council continues to deliver on its mandate of pioneering the growth, the development and the transition of the South African fashion economy today. Over the next few weeks, the Cape Town Fashion Council will continue to present these world-class, high-impact sessions with fashion industry leading voices and pioneers to educate and move the economy forward. Now, so much change in the world of fashion education in recent years, and more so now during this period is taking place. And today we're chatting to Gregg Maragelis, Head of Institution and Director at the Cape Town College of Fashion Design, also the Fashion Institute of Garment Technology. Gregg Maragelis, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Colin, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Greg, for taking the time out to chat to us. We know that you're one of the leading voices in South Africa when it comes to fashion education, and so we're very privileged to have you on the show. Now, Greg, as I mentioned, the world of fashion, or the fashion world, has been turned upside down in just about every aspect of that world, and we're seeing that more so now during this period. But Greg, to kick this off, how are fashion institutions adjusting to these changes?
All right, Colin, now we've got two sets of changes and two sets of circumstances we're looking at. So the immediate ones are how are fashion institutions managing the COVID circumstances, and that's obviously, like all academic institutions, we've moved immediately online, and I would like to give a heads up to all the institutions in South Africa for their progressiveness. And that also goes very much hand in hand with what's happened with fashion education, where there has become far more of a focus on digital and the business components of fashion, which means that it means more access to learning with students from a distance. So that's the immediacy, is that we have stayed connected, we've stayed abreast, we are able to manipulate our curriculums, and we are able to move forward. So in that capacity, it's really great to see the fluidness of the fashion education system really working in an online space. It's been something that many of us wanted to explore for many years and haven't been confident, and this sort of immediacy has made us realize the potential to do so, and how to integrate it further into our curriculum, and how much people are actually enjoying it, which is a great thing. Our students specifically were very fortunate that they were managed to go online even before lockdown, because we were very proactive. I must say that has to do with the literacy of your team. Because I do have quite a technically skilled team, and they were able to transfer and transpose all our learning digitally within 5 days. And we went live even before lockdown. And so our students haven't even, they've had no obstacle to learning. And what we've also deemed very important is to be inclusive of all learners. In other words, we can't only cater for the privileged learner. We can't only cater for the people with devices. We've had to seek alternatives that are inclusive of everybody. And that is the way forward, is an inclusive education that looks at what is happening globally consistently, and what are the answers that we need to look at now. So I'm sure you're going to be asking me a few questions that's going to connect to this, so I'm going to leave that answer there.
Okay, I want to talk industry, Greg, and I know you're one of the leading voices when it comes to education. Now, you've pretty much answered every single question that I could possibly pose to you in that one introduction. No, I'm teasing, Greg. I want to break this down quickly. You mentioned earlier that with the crisis, when the crisis hit, you immediately, as the Cape Town College of Fashion Design and your team, you immediately jumped onto digital. Now, this is not a reality that that many others face. I mean, most or many others went into a panic. And I recently spoke to a student, and he was in a state of panic because he's not from your institution. I mean, he's a student in the country. A state of panic. He doesn't have the skills to transition to digital. So let's break this down quickly to the students that are now having to migrate and that does not have the necessary skills. What type of skills are they now having to learn to rapidly transform onto these platforms?
Nothing that they don't have, Colin. If you are managing your learning intelligently, every student has a phone.
Yeah.
And every student uses WhatsApp every day.
Yeah.
So our primary tool for learning at the moment has been transposed into WhatsApp. And in other words, the student only needs a WhatsApp bundle and an OK phone. So yes, we will integrate Zoom meetings and actual sort of virtual classroom spaces. But for those students that don't have access to that, it actually appears immediately in WhatsApp afterwards. And then they watch they watch the tutorials that the other students have engaged with. And we are then continuing conversations on WhatsApp, which means that everybody is included. It just means that it's a little bit more labor intensive. I think the big thing for educators is that it's very much like interviewing somebody that you can read them.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the big things as an educator is that you need to read the room and you need to see their response to what you're guiding. And that's been the biggest obstacle for us to overcome. And then obviously answering the same questions repeatedly from a different angle because the face-to-face learning and the communal-based learning is no longer taking place. So I would encourage students to, just embrace technology.
Of course.
Most fashion students are introduced to digital spaces from first year or even a bridging program. And most of our students have engaged with digital learning even at school. Most government schools have got digital programs. So it's not so much the lack of technology that they have access to. It's just familiarizing themselves with a new mode of learning.
Absolutely.
The top word that we all not very much leaning towards, but that new normal is actually what needs to be considered, because me talking to you virtually is exactly the same as me being interviewed with you, and that's the same. So there's actually almost more learning is taking place with using the online programs. It means that as educators, for example, we have to prepare more content because we can't just deliver it, and we have to give you more content in case you don't have the necessary tools to explore all of it. So it actually creates a far more solidified learning approach, which is, I think we will be considering actually retaining quite a large part of it going forward because of the success of it.
Wow! I think your response is an ideal case of leadership. In all honesty, Greg, it's not that you were thrown a curveball. I think what we're seeing a lot of is in the fashion space and among creatives is that they're overwhelmed by the challenges and the necessary preparation might not have been in place. And listening to you speak, I now understand that you had the necessary tools and the skills, and now it's just a matter of applying and adapting to the changes, as opposed to now have to figure this out. Now, somebody recently publicly said that self-taught talents often demonstrate that one does not necessarily need a degree in fashion to succeed in the industry. But I know that fashion colleges still plan will continue to play a major role in preparing the next generation of business fashion professionals, because fashion colleges are not going anywhere. But Greg, quickly in your prediction, what does the future of fashion schools or fashion education look like?
Okay, firstly, I want to answer that question. Do you think the first part of your statement was, do you need a fashion education? So do you think every fashion designer that studies, a student that has studied fashion design, do you think that they end up, do you know that some of them end up being engineers, or they have co-articulated? So nothing stops a business person from, when they have a strong vested interest in fashion, starting a fashion business.
Fashion brand, yeah.
So it turns it all on its head. Anybody that studies a degree, how many of them actually work in that degree field? So I'm going to just respond back to that and say to you, one of the primary things that happens in fashion schools is that your top tier of students is immediately swallowed by retail.
Wow.
So as an emerging fashion student, you get offered a job which is quite lucrative to start your own little business. You don't have the economy, you don't have all the needs. And so being offered a solid job and an income is far more sort of enticing than having to struggle and hustle for a few years. So people with world experience and good taste, those are, yes, they can be contributors, but what we are wanting to do as educators at the moment is to educate in new ways and bring in the new languages. So yes, if you look at South African fashion education and then you go and visit, I don't even want to use the word China, but if you go and visit China and you look at their fashion schools, they are actually buildings. They are city centers where they have floors full of technology. Now, that space is different to the space that I choose to occupy. I choose to look at fashion as an African language. I choose to look at fashion as the most important contribution that we have is sustainability. So in my center, I focus on introducing new ways of thinking for sustainable practice, for best practice. How do we bring the industry back to our local communities? How do we sell a South African product? So there are very many different ways that you can see the future of fashion. But for me, the future in fashion lies in looking after one another, which these circumstances are, because we're going to shop in our community, our borders are closed, and it all goes in line with, and we all have these old clothes, and we're tired of them. So reselling and upcycling them and repurposing is one of the most predominant things that we need to look at. Textiles, need to not be so mass-produced. They need to be looked at more conscious fabrics that have longevity. So that's our focus is, and I've just sort of described about 20 pillars of sustainability, but that is our focus, is to produce an informed next generation to save the local community, the local economy, and to make the planet holistic again.
Absolutely. I want to expound on that word informed. And again, it's evident, Gregg, that you and your team at the institution is ahead of the pack, because many of the voices we're speaking to are still striving and trying to figure out what to do, how to do it, how to outthink the challenges. And many people are still consumed by the challenges. But are we saying that fashion institutions or fashion educational institutions are going to become e-learning spaces or virtual learning spaces in the very near future?
No, I don't agree with that statement, because so it depends on which sector that you want to focus on. If we're looking at sort of the skill of fashion, meaning when we're looking at making garments or making patterns, that's part of a process. That is a skill that needs to be engaged with directly. So that is the component that we can do e-learning, but it's very much like teaching somebody maths and them doing it, but you can't actually oversee the process and guide them along the way. So you can teach somebody to sew, but then we're talking about advanced literacy and advanced skills. That's better suited to a studio environment. So yes, we can talk about limiting contact, but contact in that sort of environment, and then immediacy and the peer learning. Peer learning in fashion is one of the most important things. So peer learning is when you all sit in a studio, somebody asks a question, somebody's doing something, and you go, okay, now I know what the question, the answer is to that question. Now I know how to do this. So as far as the craft learning component of fashion, no, definitely for me, it's a contact mode that should be retained.
Absolutely.
Because it is just best practice. But that now forms. So I'm just going back to your first question. When I studied fashion many years ago, we studied for the then 3 pillars of design, which was pattern making and sewing, and then we did design. Now those pillars have changed dramatically. So those pillars, as far as garment technology, have become a small pillar.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very important that we know how to make garments and that we can be informed, because it assists us with good design and it assists us to run lines. But that is now a small component. We are looking at more. The digital world in fashion is obviously occupies all space. So digital is embedded then into everything, even if you're looking at patterns, but then design, the retail, and then we're looking at business being, one of the largest components that a fashion student needs to become conscious of.
Absolutely.
So business would include a lot of things, like I'm just using it as an umbrella, where it would include marketing, a lot of different components. And then we're going to the design component. And the design component is very much structured around primary learning. So how do I do something? And then how do I apply it? And then we go to commercial design. This is how our curriculum is structured. And then rather looking as fashion as art. Fashion has a purpose. Fashion has a voice of the community. Fashion is actually always globally responsive. And even before things happen, fashion is pushing. So true fashion designers are visionaries. They're artists. They sort of have a sense and a feeling for what's happening. So if I had to direct you to Maragelis collections 2 years ago, if I look at them now, they look like COVID fashion. Everybody's covered, masked, protected.
Wow.
That's 2 years ago. Last year we saw masks on all the runways, and that was progressive way before Wuhan happened. So there's a lot of sort of progressiveness in true fashion design. So again, if you look at those pillars, one of the biggest complaints that I get when I sit in fashion communities is that they say a fashion student is not prepared when they leave fashion college. They are not taking 9 years to study fashion. They are taking 3 to 4 years.
Yes.
In other words, everything has to be compressed and topics are introduced. And that experience gives the student an indication of what would I want to do afterwards? What area do I want to go afterwards? So if in an ideal world, we would have schools that produce only sort of creative designers. We'd have schools that produce students that are only for industry. But fashion education is still in South Africa in a very generic phase. There are now institutions offering business programs as standalone and marketing programs as standalone, but they are not sort of, people still want to have the full experience. And the full experience is what leads you to all the alternatives in the industry. Because if you look at the output spectrum of the potential employment for a student, it's huge. It's not facilitating one sector. So we cannot sort of center focus education on one center, one avenue, because also that's got to do with the fluidity, because how do we know that that center is still going to be around in the next 5 years?
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go back to this word fluid, because fluid for me is very important with fashion education, because it means that we must change and we must articulate alongside with what is happening globally or what is happening in a local perspective. So the core outcomes of learning that is underpinned with academic learning needs to be retained, but the way that we can manipulate the content to be highly responsive needs to be in place for all fashion institutions. And that has got to do with the people that are facilitating fashion school, fashion education,
yes.
that are being lecturers, facilitators, everybody needs to continue to stay informed. So for me, a fashion educator is never somebody that can stop learning, stop experiencing, stop participating, stop being aware. So the advantage of having a different layers in a fashion education community, where you constantly bring in a younger group of people that bring in the local voices, the awareness, what is happening off the street. But my biggest responsibility as the head of our institute is to be the most aware. So I turn around and say to everybody almost every day, and those of you that are listening are going to kick themselves now, because I always say to them, how come I'm 30 years or 40 years older than you guys and I'm the coolest person around? Because I am hungry for knowledge. So every experience, I need to always be aware of what is happening everywhere in the world, and how can we be responsive to it? Are we realistic? Do we realistically need to be responsive to this? How does this address our core values of sustainability and African identity? So it must be brought back into that.
Absolutely.
One of the things, for me, one of the things that this week is the most inspiring thing that I've seen, and that connects back to very important, the biggest word in fashion that exists, and it's same as business. At the moment, existence equalizes collaboration. So collaborate. So this week, I've been so excited. I saw Iranian Canadian designer that has actually worked with a technologist and created a fabric from algae. And that fabric actually changes carbon monoxide into oxygen. And so as you're wearing it, you're being ventilated and being given pure air.
Wow.
That's the future from technology and fabric. But what is the immediate future, Colin? Can we just look after one another? Can we just shop local, please?
Yeah, I love that.
And it's beautiful. This is what I'm loving about the COVID thing, is that people are buying local because they're forced to.
Because they're forced to,
Yeah, there is e-commerce, and e-commerce is a very big component. But we are feeling safer in our immediate communities. We are feeling more comfortable around. And please, can it stay that the virtual spaces are making one another more aware of who's doing what in your community.
Absolutely.
And that's the most important thing, is that South African pride needs to grow more about our incredible products. And the artistry and all of it that goes along with it. And you would have been speaking to Simon earlier, and he would have been speaking about that. Those platforms all assist us. But it's just an awareness how absolutely incredible local design is. We've had international stealing from us for so many years. Can we just, as South Africans, be incredibly proud and support?
And start appreciating and supporting that. Yeah, I think, and thank you for confirming a few of the points I made. I think in our opening statement, we said that we know that fashion institutions or colleges are going nowhere. And I think you've proven that. And that is why the Fashion Council wanted to bring you onto the show as one of the leading voices. One of the things that we love about you, Gregg, and that is very evident, is that you are very informed. And often this is not the case with other educators in the industry. So quickly to fashion educators that are not as informed as you are, and they don't have the necessary skills to now deal with the current situation. What do you say to them in terms of upskilling? Fashion educators, what should they be doing now if they're not ready to handle these drastic changes?
The most important thing is to, as all of us, we need to just embrace change, and we need to allow ourselves to be open and not to resist change, because the world is changing consistently, and you just need to go, okay, I'm not afraid. And that's the biggest obstacle. Colin, I must be honest with you, 15 years ago, I didn't know how to switch on a laptop. I was very spoiled. I worked in the industry. I had PAs. I never did anything. I had people that followed me around and did stuff for me. And I still do, but but I have become not afraid. So that is my biggest thing, is don't be afraid. Try it. Connect yourself. Ask questions. Don't be intimidated, because that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is to put my ego aside and go, well, I don't know. I don't understand. And who can I ask? And that's what the Cape Town Fashion Council is doing.
Absolutely.
Is providing these opportunities to go, I don't understand. Please can I just ask without judgment? And that's, I am here for any fashion student, any emerging designer, because that's what people know me to do. Is all I want to do is help and assist the industry to grow from a local perspective. So if there's fashion educators out there that would like to have input, our team will gladly assist you with what we've done. We might not be a perfect model, but what we are doing is we're constantly addressing how the students are engaging and what their experience is, and how do we need to change it up. Because you can't keep a set structure. It's the same if you walk into a classroom. If you are a static teacher or a lecturer and you walk in and you deliver the same lecture for 10 years, no 10 classes are the same. You have to be adaptive. You have to be aware of current circumstances. You have to have currency in language. So how do I start that? You started in social media. You join platforms like the Cape Town Fashion Council. You start looking at business of fashion. All of the important voices. Just be inspired, because when you are inspired, you become somebody that can radiate inspiration to others.
Absolutely. Yeah. Two things you mentioned. So we've spoken to heads of HR companies, we've spoken to heads of finance companies and investment companies these past few days, Greg, and there's two things that every single industry leader has said. One, that now is the time to collaborate. It's very important that we collaborate and just reaffirm and reestablish this community that we have within the industry. And secondly, don't be afraid of technology or embracing technology, which you just mentioned is something that you did. And I think for our leaders within the industry, it's important that they just embrace and figure out how to use the technology to better advance what they're doing. I also think, to summarize what we've been discussing thus far, that traditional learning is institutions or education organizations within the fashion industry, the traditional ones are not going anywhere, but now more than ever it's important, like Greg and his team has proven to be possible, that we figure out how to use technology to better our learning tools or system.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Greg, let's quickly talk about challenges. So, fashion educators that are now beginning to migrate onto digital, and they're facing challenges. What are some of the challenges that you are seeing, and also how do we address them?
Okay, so the primary issue is obviously economy for connectivity for a learner. And that we have been promised that the government would be facilitating economy for learners for connectivity, and it depends on the longevity of this lockdown experience. So that is something that needs to be looked at. And if e-learning is something that is continued, then it's the same as saying when you sign up for this course, you are going to require these things.
That becomes part of you.
People didn't sign up and say you need to have access to X amount of data and things. So that's the first thing. Then I've been speaking to people that train globally, and I've been speaking to business people. The big transition is the time factor. So we are no longer working to 8 hour days, we are working 12 to 18 hour days to prepare for this online learning thing. But I do feel that it's because it's a transition. And the more you experience it, the more you will consolidate the experience, and it won't be so challenging. So we are, as a community, a CTCFD community is hypersensitive to the students' needs and what the actual experience is, and that we want to ensure that that sort of learning is attained, but the experience of a learning must also be positive. So those are the challenges that really impact on the lectures at the moment. One of the other biggest things that the first few weeks was us filming ourselves, facilitating lectures, and all the silly things that went along with it. We created blooper reels of. My example was that I was halfway through a lecture, and my little dog was so frustrated, and it was sitting on my foot, and later on, because I wasn't giving it attention, I decided to pee on my foot. And then obviously I had a little bit of a reaction, but we've had really entertaining experiences that we share with one another, and those are slowly sort of filtering out as we've now become accustomed to how to film ourselves, the approach to how do I position a camera, specifically when we're talking about garment technology. We're very fortunate that Mrs. Webster, who is sort of spearheads our garment technology department, her husband built a whole camera platform that she can film. So those are the sort of adaptive things that but it is about talking to one another. How did I experience this? What was my challenge? And then, not to engage with it. And then when your child runs in, or your dog runs in and or you get up and you don't have trousers on, you actually rather include that in your lecture.
Absolutely.
Because the human factor is what fashion is about. It's not an abstract. The human factors are part of an experience. So instead of editing those now, we're just including them. Because it makes the student laugh, it makes the student feel better, that it's not this sort of like perfect posed environment.
Absolutely. I think that opens up another avenue of education, and I know Cape Town Fashion Council is at the forefront of bringing this very resources and information and tools, because suddenly educators are having to learn how to educate on these platforms, and I think this is it's an organic process of evolution that all these different players in the industry are facing and learning. And again, key players like yourself leading the way, and obviously the rest of us can follow. But Greg, what are some of the upcoming initiatives that you, or projects that you have planned and that you're going to be presenting to the industry?
Colin, there were 500 plans that now are in a flux of change.
Of course.
The exciting component for me is that projects we are not putting dates to, but the most exciting thing for me is the move to digital, the consciousness of fashion literacy as an emotion. One of the biggest achievements that I feel that I've attained is that, and my team has attained, is that we've actually implemented immediate assessments that help students cope with their emotions. Yesterday I had it's incredible what the students have. They've done an upcycled urban streetwear assessment where they've used their emotional response to the COVID circumstances to inspire their upcycled garments. Wow. That to me is a greater achievement than winning an international award, because that means I've actually looked after my community.
I love that.
The emotional processes that they've gained in that, and that we will be sharing it on social media in the next few days, in the next few weeks. But it's been transformative. And that's what my purpose in life is to assist people to transform to a better place.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I can tell you huge plans that we have at CTCFD, but at the core for us is each student, their well-being, and how we can facilitate them to be the best person that they can be.
Oh.
Then I know my job has been achieved.
Oh,
so students will start with us in first year, and they will be petrified of me. And when they graduate from us in third year or an advanced diploma level, and they talk to me as a peer, then I know my job has been done.
Then you've done the job.
That is our focus, is transforming people to becoming independent thinkers that can do a whole lot of opportunities. The plans for us as an institution, we have various programs that we're implementing next year that we're very excited about. We have moved campuses. You've been to the new campus. We'll be occupying even more space in the new campus, introducing very exciting new programs, which we'll be sharing with everybody quite soon. They're very exciting to us. We've worked very hard for 2 years on sort of consolidating the curriculum, getting them accredited, and when we are able, we will share it.
I love that. Yeah, we know Cape Town. We know the Cape Town College of Fashion Design has been one of the leaders in fashion education here in South Africa. Now we've spoken. Gregg has given advice and tips to students within the fashion students, as well as fashion educators, on how to successfully migrate or transition onto digital platforms, but not forgetting the fundamentals. I think our biggest question for this episode was, how is fashion education changing and what is the future? And I think Gregg has confirmed and cemented the fact that traditional fashion educational institutions are not changing, but now more than ever, institutions have the opportunity to use digital as a way to enhance their learning programs as well as their learning tools. Gregg, I want to say thank you so much. For more information on the Cape Town College of Fashion Design, if you're an aspiring student, hop on over to their website for more information, as well as upcoming projects. Gregg, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us. We appreciate and value you, and we see the work that you're doing in the industry.
Thank you very much, Colin. Have a good afternoon.
I'm going to wrap this up with one final word of advice to the industry, Gregg, and then we'll let you go.
One final word of advice is that make it happen.
I love that.
You can do it. Make it happen. Don't underestimate yourself. Make it happen.
I love that. Those are the words or final words of
and make it happen.
I love that. Final words of advice from Gregg Maragelis, the director or the CEO and director at the Fashion Institute of Garment Technology, also head of institution at Cape Town College of Fashion Design. Thank you so much, Gregg. Take care for now and God bless.
Thank you. Same to you, Colin.
Thank you. So, in the next few episodes and weeks, the Cape Town Fashion Council will continue to bring you more inspiring and empowering episodes with industry leaders and pioneers to help move South Africa's fashion economy forward. Join me next time, right here on Cape Town Fashion Council. I'm your host, Colin Donstow.